Hello, everybody. Today we're going to see what we are playing against the very interesting gambit, which is called Belgrade Gambit. So we're starting with e4, e5. As always, white is putting the king's pawn to the center. We are replying with the same move, knight f3, the main move, which is targeting the e5 square and also protecting the square on d4 for potential d4 push. We go for knight c6, defending on e5 and also controlling d4 square. Knight c3, very logically continuing development, getting into the position of scotch for knights. And after knight f6, here white is playing d4, transposing to the scotch, but after we take on d4, white is not recapturing the pawn on d4, but white is jumping with the knight all the way to d5. This is a starting position of the Belgrade Gambit. The main idea of this gambit for white is that many times black has ideas of pushing forward the d pawn. And now, since white's knight from c3 is jumping to d5, this is not going to be possible physically. So this gambit is definitely not something like dubious because white can easily equalize. It just depends how we approach the gambit. And the way that we propose you to treat it is following. Of course, there are some crazy lines with knight takes only 4. This gambit is played with many attacking player. So we don't want to get into those territories where we don't really know much, where pieces are hanging in the air. So that's how we normally try to treat gambits. If we took a pawn, it's enough for now. We can give a chance for white to regain the pawn. Meanwhile, we just want to finish the development, playing bishop e7. It's a main line and most solid way to play because we just want to castle in the next move and say that we don't really want to hold on to the pawn to d4. We give it back to white and white can just simply take the pawn. So here there are a few moves for white. Let's start with the bishop d3. This is actually the latest trend, which played many times by Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky. Basically, what white is saying that they are not interested in taking the pawn. They rather want to finish the development and then later continue. And still, this knight on d5 is kind of annoying because we never can push for the d5 break. We go for d6, we continue the development and preparing our light square bishop to get out somewhere on g4. So in case of the castle, we can already go all the way to g4. Now we don't give up the pawn. Now we have a chance to develop the piece at the same time creating a pin. And now knight cannot take the pawn on d4 any longer. h3 looks very logical because now white is asking a question to the bishop. What do you want to do? Do you want to stay or you take? And we're taking on f3. Queen takes. And now our pawn could be actually safe because after knight e5, we are going to trade a couple of pieces. And after short castle, we can see that the pawn on d4 is actually not in danger at all. Yes, white has a bishop pair, but the position is pretty, not so open. It's not very close, but it's not so open. So yeah, in the next move, we will play something like c5, and most likely we're going to have a nice pawn, and we're going to have just an extra pawn position. So let's see what happens if white is starting with h3 move. Obviously, h3 move is against our idea of bishop coming to the g4 square so that there is no pin on the knight on f3. So that would be very annoying to allow, so that's why h3 is a nice move. We castle short. And here knight e7 is not really working because after queen e7, bishop g5. The problem is that our h6, if bishop goes away, we have g5. And after white is sacrificing a piece, we have a d5 move, and there are simply no pieces which are going to attack our king. There is only one bishop. And meanwhile, we're going to capture a pawn on e4. So castle is already can happen because there is no bishop g4 any longer. So now we have to decide what we want to do, and we can capture that knight on d5. So knight takes d5 and e d5, knight e5. We're just going for some exchanges. Of course, in this position, if white would take the knight, then there would be always a problem because white would be down a pawn. But that's why knight, of course, has to take the pawn on d4. And then we are already ready to take the bishop. And after a trade, we can see that we have actually the bishop pair. Maybe we achieved actually something. Bishop f6, we're trying to develop as fast as possible, because due to the pawn on d5, white has definitely more space advantage in the center. But definitely we don't really have weaknesses, and position is kind of symmetrical. c4, white is continuing creating the very nice pawn chain. Rook e8, bishop d2, bishop takes d4, queen d4, and bishop f5. So now we traded a pair of bishops. The position is kind of equal, but we can put the pawns on the f6 and b6 squares in the next moves in order to try to restrict the bishop of white. The position is around equal. There is more space for white, definitely, but there is not more to that. And we have also opposite colored bishop. Let's not forget about that. Okay, that was a bishop d3 move, which is very interesting. Now we continue with knight takes d4. Let's see what happens if knight is immediately recapturing. First of all, then it is already on the next move stops being called a gambit, because the gambit, it was move ago when they didn't take on d4. Now after knight d5, white is taking. It doesn't really make so much sense. So we take the knight on d5, takes, we trade pieces, and after castle, bishop e2. c5 is an interesting move, but we're going for bishop f6, queen d3, and after d6 castle, rook e8. We basically have no problems at all. In the next moves, we are threatening to play something like g6 and develop the bishop to f5, and feels like white is a bit behind in the development, and for that, I would say that black is at least slightly better in this position. But of course, let's not forget about the space advantage which white is having. So it should be rather equal position. Bishop f4. So now white is creating a big threat. Taking on c7, it's going to be a fork, so we have to do something about it. And definitely d6 is the best approach. Also, at the same time, we're opening ideas such as bishop g4 later to be possible. So now knight takes d4, and now white is taking the pawn not in order to take the pawn, but rather to place the knight all the way to b5 to target the pawn on c7. In case we take here on d5, knight d5, it is still an option. Knight takes d4. And after castle, we have bishop f6 idea. We can also continue development with bishop to f5 or g6 and bishop to f5. We have opposite castled kings. That's why there could be some attack on both king and queen side. So interesting position, definitely. But there is another option which we have. And the option is actually to be rather more ambitious and to allow knight coming to b5. And for that, we have to castle. So let's say if white is taking on c6, we grab with the pawn. Okay, well, white spoiled the pawn structure for us, but after knight e7, queen e7, we're going to take on e4. In this position is possible because after pawn takes, we will have queen e4 attacking both king and the bishop. So after queen e2, we have rook e8. So now again, this take is not possible because we're going to take with a queen, and after queen trades, we're going to win the bishop back. So that's About knight c6. Okay, following the plan, knight b5 looks very logical. White spent like 3 moves to get with the knight to b5 and attack the pawn on c7. The other knight also went like two moves, so altogether 5 moves for the knight jumps. Meanwhile, we developed really nicely. So now we go for knight e5, ed5, and knight e5. So the thing is, of course, for white it's still important that there is because of this pawn on d5, there is a space advantage for white. But we got such a huge advantage in development. Meanwhile, for all these moves with the jump with the knights, all jumps with the knights. So knight e5, and now after queen d2, white wants to castle long. We play c5. Actually, it's a perfect move because now it's saying basically that this pawn on d5, this space advantage is actually not so important because we are getting some kind of Benoni-like pawn structure position, and we are ready to push with a6, b5 with tempos, which is the key idea in Benoni pawn structure. So in case dc6 happens, bc, knight d4, and c5. And basically, with that move, we are pushing the knight away. White is losing more time. Knight has to jump. And we have absolutely amazing position since we already finished the development. Bishop takes e5 as another option, de, then d6. White is pushing all the way forward. Bishop g5, we are using the fact that it's a tempo and also cutting the king from castling. Queen d5, then queen a5, we're giving a check, c3, and bishop e6. The problem now that d6 is not going to be a strong passer, but rather going to be a weakness on d6, which we'll take later after kicking back the knight from b5. And, well, also the fact that king is still in the center and white cannot castle is also pretty bad. Bishop e2, white is trying to castle, and this time most likely castling short, since bishop e2 is played. So a6, we're pushing the knight away, knight goes away, and f5. We're getting more space. In the next move, we're ready to go with the pawn to b5. We will get more space as well on the king side. Pawn structure is great for black. And even though there is this pawn on d5, it's not really a big advantage from white. It could be even a weakness later if we manage to attack it. And we also control the most of the central squares, so it's very good position for black. Objectively speaking, it's a slight advantage for black. So in case bishop e2 is played immediately without queen d2, then we go for knight g6 and we target the bishop on f4, ask some questions, where does the bishop want to go? In case of bishop e3, I would like you to stop the video right now and try to find the best move. On the bishop e3, there is a very nice move, bishop g5. Bishop on e7 is much worse piece than bishop on e3, so it would be really nice to trade those. So now we are offering a trade, and there is not much else that white can do other than trading. So bishop g5, queen g5, and we're kind of blundering the pawn on c7, but we will take the pawn on g2, which is more valuable. After bishop f3, we have queen g5 back, knight takes the rook, we sacrifice the rook for a time, and rook e8 check. Bishop goes back, and now we have knight f4, targeting the bishop on e2. There are going to be moves like queen g2 as well, taking the bishop, and so on and so forth. The position is losing for white. So g3 in case white is being more cautious, not allowing queen take on g2. Then here we're going for rook e8, immediately pinning the king. So knight c7 is definitely possible, but here we can go with a very nice move because we have bishop g4 targeting the e2, and we don't care if the knight take any of the rooks. Knight e6, knight is trying to stop this very nasty pin, but then we are having queen e5. We're saying there is still going to be a pin. Bishop cannot take the bishop on g4. So that's the That was the line. So that's why instead of knight c7, white has to finally castle. And after castle, we play rook e7, defending the pawn on c7. Next move, we are ready to jump with the bishop all the way to h3, challenging the rook and highlighting weaknesses on the light squares. We are ready also to bring the rook all the way out to the e8 square, kick the knight from b5 square. Well, the position looks amazing for black, and objectively speaking, there is a slight advantage. In case bishop goes to g3, then we are ready. Okay, there we have one interesting move, but after f5, f4, the thing is we would kind of trap our knight on g6. It doesn't really make so much sense. But that's why it's better to play without f5, but play bishop f6. Bishop on f6 is located on the long diagonal, which is very nice, also targeting b2. It's a perfect square for the bishop in this position. So c3, white is trying to block the bishop. a6, we're challenging the knight. Now that there is a c3 plate, knight can go to d4. Knight d4, but not to c3. And now rook e1, rook e8, sorry. Now we are pinning the bishop again. We're slightly better, definitely. And the problem is now for white that king is still remaining in the center, because if the next move white is castling, then we're going to take the knight. And after pawn takes, there are going to be some issues with the pawn structure for white, since white cannot take with the queen due to the problem on e2. Okay, that was the bishop f4 line. Now we are going to look at the bishop c4. Bishop c4 looks like a logical move. It's a main move, actually. White is putting more power into this d5 square, defending the knight, and makes this move makes a lot of sense, and also ready to castle. So now we are also castling. Castle is happening, but now, since we already castled and the pawn on e4 is hanging, then we can take it. We are going to grab the pawn. Knight takes e4. So now if knight takes on d4, we are going to go back. We're offering to trade all the knights because we are up a pawn. We like trades, right? Knight e7, knight e7, bishop g5. White wants to spoil the pawn structure. We're playing knight g6 with the idea of pushing h6 so that there is no bishop h4 any longer. And in case white goes for rook e1, which is the main move, which is creating some attacks on the knight and the bishop, then we still go back. We have to go back. So here it looks like that rook e7 could be an interesting sacrifice, but after knight e7, knight f6, gf, and bishop h6, we just play d5. And basically, these threats are going nowhere. There is not going to be any queen g4 because we are controlling, sorry, we are controlling the g4 square. And well, we can always give back material because we are having 2 extra pawns, even though they are doubled. So knight e7 looks logical, knight e7, and here bishop g5 again trying to put pressure on our knights. We have the d5 always intermediate move, so it's very nice to use it. d5, bishop f6, gf. Bishop goes to d3, we go bishop g4, and we are kind of defending the pawn on the d4 square. In case of queen takes d4, then we take the bishop, obviously. Queen takes, rook takes on e7, and this endgame, we are having an extra pawn. Of course, we have doubled pawns, let's not forget about this, but there are still some chances to win this endgame because of the extra material. And in any endgame, a pawn can become a queen, and we can win that. So definitely white will have to defend. So let's look at the queen d4 instantly played instead of bishop g5. Then the thing is here, the main move in this position is d5, targeting the bishop with a tempo, which makes a lot of sense. Bishop goes back to d3, knight g6, b4. The only thing which I don't really like in this line is that knight is coming all the way to e5. there are opportunities for bishop to go to the long diagonal, to the g5. So that's why in this position we don't go for d5, but we're going for more modest move, d6. So first of all, the idea of d6 is that we're not overextending with d5, the pawn is not going to be weak on d5. And also the second idea is that we are controlling the e5 square, where knight of white wants to jump at some moment. So after bishop g4, there would be no knight e5. So it's much better move. And after b4, it's not really effective any longer, because now we can go bishop g4, there is no knight e5. So bishop g5 looks logical, bringing out the piece, threatening to take on f6. We're taking the knight with the bishop on f3. It's a pretty forced line. Bishop f6, knight c6 with a tempo. We are going to trade the queens. Bishop e8, rook f8, take on c2, take. And we are entering the endgame, where we are having rook for two bishops, but we also have two pawns. In this position, bishops are, they are active, but they are not so active, and potentially we could have two passers, two protected passers, and connected passers. So that's why, even if there are some chances to win in this endgame, those chances are definitely for black. And rook and two pawns normally stronger than two pieces, but since this is a bishop pair, I would say that I would bet on a draw in this endgame. But also the weak pawns for white could also contribute to some more chances for black. So what happens? So add a d6. So here bishop g5 looks like the most ambitious approach, is coming immediately and targeting the knight on g5. Then we are jumping with a knight to f5. We are attacking the queen. Also, we are preparing at the same time to go with h6. The idea is that the bishop will not be able to go to h4. We're going to take it. So it's typical idea what we had. Earlier, we had the knight standing on g6. So if queen goes to c3, then we go h6, bishop takes, queen takes, the trades are happening, we're still up a pawn, but we have doubled pawns right now, rook e4 and knight g7. Definitely looking at this position, we can say that white has compensation because of the more active pieces for the pawn. But if we're going to develop, like play bishop e6 in the next move, bring the rooks to the game, I would say that we have chances to get the better position. So queen f4 immediately is being played. So here we go again with the h6. And the main idea of this queen f4 is that after bishop f6, queen f6, there is a g4. It looks like our knight is actually trapped. There are no real squares to go. If we go backwards after trade with the queens, then the rook is going to take. So we have to do something about it. And we go with g5, intermediate move, attacking the queen. Now queen goes away. Now we have another intermediate move. We go with a d5. The problem here is if we go with knight to g7, since we can do it, there is going to be bishop d3, and well, that's going to be impossible to defend from the checkmate. Queen, so d5 in this position, we have to make another intermediate move, attacking the queen and the bishop, so the pawn has to be taken. If queen takes on d5, then we play just knight d6, and we have some attacking opportunities on g4, and the bishop is a bit hanging, knight is hanging, so it looks like position of white is kind of loose. Bishop takes on d6, on d5, we have c6, another intermediate move. We had already 1, 2, 3 intermediate moves. Bishop takes on c6, then we have just knight d6. It's going to win a piece because we have another intermediate move, which is attacking the queen. So gf has to be played. If case of bishop f5, it's going to be too much. for intermediate move, because after queen d4, queen takes, knight takes, white is going to win because white is winning a piece in this position. So cd5, queen d5, bishop f5. So we're getting into this position where we are having safer king because white has some issues due to the lack of the g pawn. We have 3 against 2. White has 3 against 2 on the queen side. Maybe slightly more active heavy pieces because our rooks are still not out of in the game, but potential attack on the king is definitely there. Also, since there are very weak light squares and we have a light squared bishop, we could create some attack most likely. But again, the position is objectively equal, but there is a chance for a counterattack for black here. That's all about the Belgrade Gambit. So let's go through some key positions, a few key moments from this chapter. So let's start from the beginning. Basically, the starting position of the Belgrade Gambit is after this knight d5 move is played. Once again, it's stopping the idea of d5 from black. And the main point in this gambit, what we want to do, we don't want to rush into many sharp variation which attacking players like the ones who are playing Belgrade Gambit know. So that's why we're going for the more solid approach. We're going for bishop e7. We would like to finish the development castle as fast as possible. And then if we want, and then if we can, we would capture the pawn on e4. So the next position is already after castling. That's what we're already discussing. So both sides castled. And now, since there is no real danger to our king, we are free to to grab the pawn on e4. We are free to do so because we already castled and there is not much danger. So knight takes e4. We are going for another pawn and some lines, as we saw that we were going to be up a pawn. Next position is when white took on d4 after trade with the I think it was knight trade, or was some trade, something happened. I know knight d7, and queen d4 took the pawn. Yes, queen d4 took the pawn. So the thing is that there is nothing really here for white. We have an extra pawn, and but it's very important where we put the pawn, because main line and most the move which is played the most is d5. But here I recommend to play for d6. So the point with the d6 is that we stop the knight from coming to e5, and then this ideas of playing something like b4, bringing the bishop to b2 is not going to be so annoying since we took the e5 square from the knight. And this is actually the last position. I hope you had fun today. I hope you enjoyed today's chapter, and I hope it was useful for you. And see you in the next chapter.